the research process, what is in the research process, what frames the research process, and then ultimately, where does it take us through the actual process. So you'll see a term here, and the term is paradigms. What does the term paradigm suggest to you? What is a
Uh,
paradigm?
is it similar to paradox? No.
No, paradoxes, opposites, paradigm. Okay,
Uh, so like a clearly alliance.
just say that again.
A clearly alliance.
No, 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 not at all. And there is a bit of alignment. Paradigm is a mindset. It is a framework. So the best way for me to explain a paradigm is to talk about the health services. Up to 2008, and we're talking about health and aging, the existing paradigm was that aging is inevitable. And everything that we had to do in terms of that mindset was to slow down the aging process. So up to 2008, the paradigm around health was and aging was that it's a process that we try and slow down, so we give you creams for your face, etc., and we Botox and all of that stuff. 2008, there was a switch where aging was being treated as a disease to be cured. So the mindset from 2008 and was to see aging as a disease, and it is something that we can cure as a disease. And the shift immediately meant from 2008, we were finding ways of 3D printing body parts to increase people's life expectancy. And there's some predictions from there as well that the first person to live to 200 has already been born. So the thinking is that that mindset guides your thinking within a particular field, within a particular set of thought processes, within a particular, in this case, how we do research. So it is a mindset. It guides the process. So think of 2008. Prior to that, the process was, what do we do to counteract aging? Post
Okay.
that, we said, now we're going to find ways of curing aging as a disease. It changes the focus in the medicine, it changes the focus in the research, it changes the way we look at it. And within in research, there are three mindsets, there's three paradigms that we have to worry about. And we'll talk about those. You're going to see stuff on interpretivism, you're going to see stuff on critical realism, and you're going to see stuff on positivism. And each of those mindsets will have their own process in terms of how we look at research. So if we look at that first question in on your paper there, and you'll see here, it talks about positivism. Now, from a positivist perspective, everything in positivism is about reducing human behavior, in our instance, to numbers and stats. In terms of interpretivism, here the belief around research is that in order to actually understand a person's behavior, a person's life, it's important to speak to that person, interview that person, observe that person, and then it is really centered around meaning being created from the perspective of the individual. Critical realism is where we adopt both. Now, critical realism is about fixing things generally. So we will have a combination of positivism, the stuff that we try and reduce everything to numbers and stats, and
Numbers
we'll
and
have
stats.
numbers and stats, positivism, and then interpretivism, where we actually understand from the perspective of the person's lived experience. Okay. And then critical realism is a combination of positivism and interpretivism. And it's normally about fixing things. It's normally about fixing things, and we'll look at that, and empowering people. So every person's personality naturally lends itself to one of those. As a finance student, I would imagine you would want to work in terms of positivism because you can describe everything through numbers and stats. My
It's
master's
easy to
degree,
describe.
sorry, Boya.
It's easy to do, to like quantify things in numbers and stats for like a layman.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, you know, and if that's your point of view, we'll do a positivist approach in your research. Um, in my master's, I did a positivist research. I turned things into numbers and stats. For my PhD, I did interpretivism because I think that you can only really understand people if you can understand their experiences, if you can understand their perceptions, etc. So imagine there is a car accident and you have witnesses standing next to the road observing the car accident. Each of those witnesses would have their own perceptions of what happened in that accident. No two people will see the accident exactly in the same way. And that's the interpretivist component. When you get somebody to come in and measure how long the person's skid marks were on the tar, you know, what the reaction time would have been to slow down, you know, you could actually reduce everything to numbers and
Positive.
stats using positivism.
Okay.
So, and then the combination of those would be the evidence we would present at court, you know, and that's to empower a judge to take a decision. So that you'd have, from an interpretivist perspective, people going and giving their witnesses, their evidence, and then from a positivist perspective, you would have the crash investigator saying, he would have been traveling at 82 k's an hour in a 60 k zone based on how long the car skidded, working in things like reaction time, etc. So those are the key differences. And these mindsets, essentially, if you are a positivist, you will try and reduce numbers, everything to numbers and stats. My oldest son is 28. He looks okay, he's quite a senior person, but his background is he writes artificial intelligence. And when he did his master's, he did it obviously quantitatively. He believes you can reduce everything to numbers and stats, including human behavior. I
Even
disagree with him.
my brother's like that because he did actual science.
He did actuarial science. That is impressive, boy. Oh, bloody
Yeah.
hell. Yeah. So my
Yeah, my
son,
brother. Yep.
my son did pure math. So he did pure math, but yeah, I mean, for his honors in pure math, and that included a dissertation, he got 96 or 97% average. Um,
Yo.
but he can do math. You know, he's matric, his math, he got 97% for core maths in matric. He's blimmin' bright, way brighter than his dad could ever be. If your brother's done actuarial science, did he finish his actuarial degree?
Yeah, he's working for Old Mutual as actual analyst, and he just got a few more board exams to be a fully fledged actuary.
No, well, then your brother's also got a serious brain in his head. And if your sister's a doctor, she has a serious brain in your head. And I think you then have a serious brain in your head. And we've got to get that brain to come to life a bit in your research. I think we'll do something. Yeah, it's going to be perfect, but it's going to be perfect. But my son and your brother would reduce everything to numbers and stats. I couldn't do that. You know, my natural inclination, despite having a quantitative master's, would be to understand from the perspective of the person, to understand their lived experiences, to interview the witnesses rather than measure the skid mark on the ground. Okay, so those are the three, and you need to we'll work out how to write research questions in those. Okay, so there's some stuff that I'm going to skip where. So generally, research is never for the sake of research. For me, research is when you want to solve problems, when you want to look at relationships between variables, which is always going to be positivism. So we could look at the relationship between the amount of alcohol consumed and your ability to drive. And obviously, you know that it's an inverse relationship. The more you drink, the less you're able to drive, and we've got enough evidence of that. But it's about relationships. But you can also interview people who drive drunk, and you could say to them, why do you drive drunk? And often people will say to you that they drive better when they're drunk, which is just horse manure. Okay. So that's interpretivism. Don't tell me you drive better when you're drunk.
No, I don't drink. I used to long ago.
Okay. No, that's fine. Well, that's fine. Yeah, it happens. It happens. I
No,
can't say that.
I never ever drank and drove. Never ever.
You've never drunk. You've never had alcohol.
No, never drank and drove.
Oh yeah, no, that's good. Well, that's good. And then you'll
That's a
see
death
some.
wish.
Yeah, I must admit, I don't drink and drive, although I haven't stopped drinking. I mean, I will have the odd beer every now and then. Okay, so you've got a sense of those three paradigms. The critical realism is the combination of that interpretivist and positivist approach. So when we look at the research process, you'll see on that process that there is no reference to your research paradigm. And the reason for this is that the process doesn't change in terms of the steps that we follow, the research process. However, the lens that we look through the actual research at, that's your paradigm. So for me, looking from an interpretivist perspective, normally I would try and understand the problem from the perspective of the person, their perceptions, their concerns, etc. But a positivist like yourself, you would look at relationships between variables. Okay, so a couple of years ago, I had two students who did research into waste and waste management, why people waste food. The interpretivist went and interviewed restaurant staff as to why they waste food, why they don't try and be a little bit more careful. And then the positivist said that she was going to look at the relationship between, it's an organizational term, organizational citizenship behavior and the view towards wasting. So two theories on waste. One, interpretivist, the other we would have done from a positivist perspective. So this process you'll see, and we'll work through this process when we do the actual research. You'll see that the different questions that you see there fit into those different steps, except the questions on the paradigms. Now remember, and this is an important bit to remember, the paradigm is not mentioned there because it is the lens that we look at the research through. So depending on whether you adopt an interpretivist or positivist or critical realist, I generally at an honors level won't allow critical realism. It's just too much to do in a short period of time. But
Because you
you
put in both
interpret,
perspectives.
yeah, it's a hell of a
Because it's
job, boy.
positive and interpretivity.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a lot for an honors. I would always recommend you only start looking at that at a master's level. But
Okay.
so you will choose either positivist or interpretivist, and I'm pretty sure you'll choose positivist. Right, so don't worry about all this stuff here. If you don't have a problem to research, you don't have a reason to do research. So there's always going to be some deficiency or gap in the real world that will drive your research, in particular from a commerce perspective, the world of work. So there's something that is not happening the way it should happen. So we could, for example, do research, and it's a bit low level, into something like accident rates within an industry. Now, the problem is that people are having accidents, and we need to figure out what causes it and how to fix it. Now, generally, if you have a cause and a fix, it would be a positivist approach, or we would then talk to people and see what contributes to them being accident prone. So there will always be a deficiency, there will always be a gap. Last year, for my third years, two of my third years, and they did it within risk management, they looked at the risk that accounting firms face when it comes to cyber crimes. So they, whether it's ransomware or which other cyber attacks there might be, the one student looked at the kinds of cyber crimes accounting firms were experiencing. The other one looked at what accounting firms were doing to mitigate the risk of cybercrime against accountant firms. So you can see that there's definitely a deficiency. There's a gap. There is a problem. And I think you need to start thinking about your own research problem. Now, not for this SLP, but what is the specific gap that you want to research? And I'm very good at helping you find these things, but that's for later. Any questions at this stage, Boya?
A basic pure game mode inside. And I'm good for now.
I don't think there's anything dramatic at this stage. I think, yeah, there's nothing major. The key thing for me is that you understand the notion of paradigms. You have to, that to me is NB at this stage. Just understand what a paradigm is, what role it serves, and then this need for a research problem. For me, if you don't have a research, yeah, go for it.
Sorry, man. Sorry to interrupt you.
Don't worry
So,
about
according to
that,
you,
bro.
a paradigm is a process and a mindset. So you can have a positive paradigm, a positive. How do you pronounce it?
Positivist, yeah.
Positivist or interpretive and a
Critical realism. There are some others,
critical.
but those are the three major ones. There's feminism and
So it could fall. A
post-feminism.
paradigm could fall under any of those because as long as it's a process and a mindset.
Yeah. So each of those is the paradigm. So you have a positivist paradigm, you have an interpretivist paradigm, and you have a critical realistic paradigm. And each of those will have its own way of doing research. The positivists would say that we're looking at reducing everything to numbers and stats. The interpretivists would say we want to understand from the perspective of the people who've lived those experiences. And then the critical realist is often looking to empower, to help, to fix. So they have combinations of the sort of stats as well as the individual experience.
Okay.
Okay. So remember, the paradigm is that lens. And you have to write that down. The paradigm is the lens that you use to look at your research.
Okay.
Prior to 2008, the lens was that aging is a process we slow down. Post 2008, the lens became aging is a process that is a disease to be cured.
Lens you used to look
So
at your.
that is a
And
disease.
do you think that changed the industry for
Well, it
aesthetic
changes
medicine?
everything. Well, it changes the way you do research. It
So
changes
it's
the
a
way.
breakthrough.
So we now have 3D people who 3D print body parts.
Because that makes it interesting because hair transplants have become very common.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually went for one and I've never been this happy.
Well, that's fantastic, Boya. You see, yeah, well, it's fantastic. I have a wonderful head of hair still. So
I
even at
saw that
61, I've
my
got
hairline
great
was
hair.
torn and thin, and so they're
I've got
taking my
great
back.
hair. But
When
I
you see,
got
if you ever
ill
meet
and
me,
I started losing my hair. And I thought about a hair transplant, but it was just stress. And my oldest son is under so much stress, but he also, just by reducing stress, his hair has grown back. Yeah, no, boy, for me, if that bothers you, you fix it. That's it. It's as
yeah, for
simple as
me, like the thing is, I had it took me a while to save up. Took me like 2 years because I wasn't earning
yeah.
a lot in my previous job. It was my first corporate job, so my job in Durban was like a BPO. But I've never felt my hope. If I show you a picture of me before and after, my whole life changed.
Well, that's
How happy
wonderful.
I
And
am.
your brother and your sister kept their hair?
Yeah, yeah. So I had male pattern baldness. It's caused by a hormone called DHT.
Oh, shit.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
androgenic. So I take a medication called finasteride, which stops
Okay.
the blocks that hormone. But I've done the trial. I went in 2024 Jan, so I just reached full results last in December. I've never been
Wonderful,
happier. My
boy.
hair is so thick and full. If I show you before and after, you won't
Oh,
recognize.
wonderful, boy. I'm so happy for you, man.
Yeah,
But think of hair loss. The
yeah.
paradigm prior to we had hair plants. Hair loss is you wore a wig or you comb your hair to hide your there at some point the lens changed to hair loss is not inevitable. We can fix hair loss. That is
Yeah,
a shift in the paradigm.
yeah,
It's a
because
wonderful
you know,
example.
I was just thinking before they had the stroke method, which is now they have the FUE, they individually extract the hair from the back and sides and put it in the top.
Yeah, yeah.
So they changed the whole way. Yeah.
The paradigm has shifted into. Ask your sister about this paradigm around aging. I mean, I'm not the right person to talk about it. Ask her how aging is treated now versus it was treated back in 2008. It's a significant. It changes your focus of your research. As I said,
And
we now 3D print body parts, boy.
yeah, and the thing also with that shift, there's a much bigger market for like aesthetic medicine and stuff.
Of course, boy. Can I be honest with you? And this
Even
stays
male.
between you and I.
Yeah,
I I had incredibly long earlobes.
yeah,
I had them cut out and reduced in size because they were bothering me.
yeah.
Best thing I've ever done. Best
So
thing I've ever done.
so what people don't understand is when I told them about my transplant there before I got it, they complained about the price. But now
Yeah.
when you saw how happy I am, how my personality changed, the price, the money is meaningless.
And, and Indian boys have amazing hair, but
Yeah.
unfortunately,
And some say some men just
some
lose hair.
you and you are more likely to have great hair as an Indian boy than
Yeah,
having not great hair. And
yeah.
what worries me is my Indian girls going bald. I see so many of my young Indian women going bald, and
I don't know.
it I feel
Yeah.
so sorry for them because
Because
yeah,
a male hair loss is actually easier to, it's more aggressive, it's more common, but it's actually easier to treat because you can suppress that hormone. For women,
yeah,
it's a lot harder to treat because it's not caused by
yeah.
like PhD or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's tough.
yeah,
I
this
feel
is,
sorry for my girls. I really do, and it bothers them. Hey, bothers them. No,
yeah, because
my
I know, sorry,
yeah,
I know a girl that went for, see, a transplant is your own hair, it's on the back and sides, it grows
yeah,
normally. But implants is fake hair, so it doesn't look as good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's awful, boy. But I mean, I'm happy your hair plant, your transplant has worked. I really am happy that it's worked. It's important that I love having great hair, and I have great hair. Right? So for me, I would lose my marbles if I went bald. Yeah, no.
Yeah. I actually like that you think like that because someone once a girl told me, I care too much about the way I look. But I mean, like everyone, I think should try and be the best version of themselves,
Yeah,
in
no,
any
boy, and it's not about what other people think, it's
It's about
about
how
what
you
you
feel.
think. So exactly. Yeah, no, don't worry about that. You did the right thing. You did the right thing. You did the right thing. Okay, boy, so let's look at the kinds of problems we'll encounter. Now, remember, we have got your first question is around problems. So they say that the kinds of problems that we encounter. So in exploratory research, what you try and do is you try and figure out what you won't know what the actual problem is. My apologies, but you often want to initially figure out where should we look. So exploratory research obviously is when the problem is so complex that you don't know where to isolate and where to start. You often will do a bit of exploratory research that will serve as the basis for future research, if that makes any sense. So exploratory research is that you're not sure what the cause is, and they talk about a limited study before you do an in-depth study. It's to start getting rid of some of those symptoms, because in problem solving you often isolate the cause from the symptoms. Exploratory research is often an initial bit of research to just try and clarify the problem. The second one, explanatory research. Now just remember, explanatory research talks about, and you can see the question. I hate that to what extent. I hate that question, but why are students unhappy with restaurant cleanliness? Explanatory research is where you're trying to explain phenomenon, and you can see is there an increase in child mortality. It is more likely to be quantitative. It's more likely to be positivist in nature. So the moment we use the term why, we look at relationships, and that would be more positivist in nature. So that would fit through reducing everything to numbers and stats. So it'll often form part of the lens within positivism, because we try and look at relationships. Okay.
Okay.
Descriptive research would be more from an interpretivist perspective, where you go to people and you understand in this case, what living conditions essentially are the consequence of not getting through school. Okay, so that will be descriptive. Your descriptive research will generally be interpretivist in nature. Explanatory research will generally be positivist, because you're looking at relationships, and you'll see in explanatory research, in interpretivism, we never use the word why, but we certainly use the word why when we look at positivist research. So this here, into question 2, allows us to reduce it to numbers and stats. And then question 3, it's about understanding people's experiences, understanding, in this instance, their living conditions, and understanding what causes those living conditions. So I'm saying in general, though. Okay, Boya, in general. Right. So from there, we have to do a literature review. Now, a literature review is where you essentially take a step back from the problem, and you go and find out what has already been written on this specific research problem. So you go and look at existing scholarship, and you will go and look at scholarly articles, etc. Now we will get the librarian when you guys start your honors to help us with those. I am trying to organize a lot of support for you guys in this honors. I used to look after the honors in Pietermaritzburg, but they're not running the honors anymore. So I'm not looking after the honors. I'm simply lecturing the research and 2 other modules, but I will play a significant part in helping you guys through these processes. So your literature review is where you go look at journals, scholarly articles, textbooks, etc., etc. We'll talk about which ones to ignore. Generally, you will use only peer-reviewed articles. Peer-reviewed articles means that there's some sort of rigor around approving the content of the actual article. And this is what you end up with. You start comparing and contrasting what other researchers did. This is a wonderfully written piece, and you can see that here it takes 3 different sources. They're a little bit old, but what it does incredibly well, it takes the first source, the second source supports what the first source said, as well as the third source there supporting the second and the first source. The literature review gives you a very clear understanding of what is out there in terms of scholarship within the field that you're researching. Now, when we teach the literature review, you'll hear me talk about 3 components. The first component that we include in a literature review, and you can write this down if you want. We'll go through all of this stuff again, obviously. The first component is your theoretical framework. So your first component under your literature review is your theoretical framework. That means you have this foundational theory that we work from, and that theoretical framework, as the term implies, will frame your actual research. They will normally have 1 or 2 theories that we use in our theoretical framework, and this will make more sense when we get there. The second part of a literature review is a review of existing literature, and I know it's play on words, where you go into other bits of research, other journals on your research topic, and you create this kind of flow in your document that's in front of you there. And then you'll see we'll have conceptualization. The conceptualization will be those key definitions that you need in order to understand the actual article that you are reading. So once you publish your article, those the definitions in the conceptualization will give the readers of your article an idea of the non-negotiable terms that they need to understand. Okay. So the third one is your research question. Now, yeah, this is where we now deviate. And so part A of the deviation is where we look at it from a positivist perspective. Generally,
Okay.
in your positivist perspective, you will have one research question. You'll have one research question. So the research question could be, what is the relationship between alcohol consumed and a person's ability to drive?
Okay.
Straightforward relationship. You can reduce it to
But you
numbers
said
and stats. Easy enough
what?
to do.
Sorry, what is not always descriptive.
Yeah, no. Okay. Yeah. So you can use a what question. You're never allowed to use why in descriptive. So you never, sorry, not
So
in
why is
descriptive.
always positivist?
Why will always be positivist. Why will
Okay.
always be positivist.
But what could be
Okay.
either
You can
or?
also use what and how. Okay. So I've just simply looked at what is the relationship between this and this.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. You
But
can,
generally, when you said when a
hmm,
relationship leads to positivist as well.
yeah. So the moment you look at relationships, it's always going to be a positive bit of research where.
Okay.
So the relationship, and you'll see we'll never use the word relationship in
But
interpretivism.
with a positive, like with a relationship, like we learned in stats, like correlation does not necessarily
And
equal
this is correlation.
causation.
This
Yeah,
is, well, correlation or
correlation does not
causation.
equal
Yeah.
causation.
So we could argue that the amount of alcohol consumed, you see, what supports your research question will always
Yeah.
be your hypothesis in in positivism. It will
Okay.
always be supported by a hypothesis. So you'll have a single research question supported by a hypothesis. We generally only allow an alternate and a null hypothesis at an honors level. We're not going to get two or three hypotheses. So your hypothesis would be the more alcohol someone consumes, the less they're able to drive.
Yeah.
And then the null hypothesis, which obviously will be wrong, will tell you that there's no relationship between alcohol consumed and the ability to drive, but that's obviously wrong. But in terms of your research question, we will always start with a single research question and we'll support that in positivism with a hypothesis or with hypotheses, your alternate and your null hypothesis.
Okay.
Okay, makes sense, Boya?
Yes.
Okay. In interpretivism, you will have a single overarching, the broadest question that you can ask about a specific research problem. You would have that, but then you'll have sub questions where you clarify that broad research question. So
Okay.
in interpretivism, you will normally have an overarching question, and then you'll have sub clarifying questions. You will not have a hypothesis.
Okay.
Okay, hypotheses belong to positivism.
So it's only for positive, because so hypothesis is when it's stats and numbers involved, and the
Yeah,
other one is obviously people's personal experience, lived experiences.
exactly, Boya.
So that's why you
Exactly.
can't. Is that why you can't put a hypothesis in it?
That's exactly it. Yeah. Because you're
Okay.
not going to be, we're not looking at relationships. We're looking at understanding people's lives.
Okay, and the other one, we had
Positivism,
positive,
we're looking at relationships.
and then we had critical realism, which was
You'd combine
interpretive.
both of those. So you would have a hypothesis, but you'll also have research questions that and clarifying research
And
questions.
interpretistic. What is it called?
Interpretivism.
Interpretative.
Interpretivist.
Interpretative. No hypothesis.
No hypothesis. You'll never have a hypothesis in interpretivism. The reason for that is a hypothesis suggests relationships. We're not looking at relationships. We're looking at understanding people's lived experiences.
Okay.
Okay. And then your critical realism will be a combination of those two. Right. So supporting your research question, your hypothesis will support your research question in in
Okay.
positivism. No, I can't
Positivism.
pronounce stuff. Okay.
Interpretative.
Not in interpretive.
Yeah,
No
positivism.
hypothesis in interpretivism
Interpretative.
here, because we're talking about hypothesis. This is now positivist,
Okay.
where you suggest a relationship between two things. My students that looked at the waste management and organizational citizenship behavior, her alternate hypothesis, which suggests the relationship, is that people that display higher levels of organizational citizenship behavior are less likely to waste food in a restaurant setting. And
So do you
then
think the hypothesis you said rules out the chances that correlation and causation is
no,
is on?
hypothesis is always about correlation and causation, boy.
So then the null hypothesis rules out
The null
that.
says that there's no relationship. And you try and prove your alternative hypothesis. Sometimes you can't prove it, then you've proven the null hypothesis.
Yeah.
Okay, so you try and prove the alternative, but if in your research you don't see a correlation, then you fail to prove the alternate hypothesis, but you actually confirm the null hypothesis. You never aim to prove the null hypothesis, but you have to confirm it if your initial assumption is not there.
Okay.
Okay. So you'll see that you either accept or reject your alternate hypothesis. And the moment you reject your alternate hypothesis, you accept your null hypothesis, which says there's no relationship. Okay. Right. Now, I'm not worried about this at this stage, Boya, but you need to start thinking about your research. I've asked to do the orientation for the research next week at the same times that we're meeting, but you'll be in class with, I would imagine, 20 or 30 other people, depending on whether they decide to do the honors in 1 or 2 years. Okay, so
I
you've
want
got
to
to
do it in
start.
1 year.
Yeah, do it in 1 year. Well,
Okay.
if you think you can do it in 1 year, you're going to work very hard, though. Please believe me
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
tell you that you're going to
No,
work your butt off.
I'm disciplined. I'm a good friend. The reason why I do it in 1 year is because I know it's going to open up a lot of opportunities. Like, ultimately, I want to earn more money and travel and enjoy the
Yeah,
luxuries of life. You know?
you're going to work your butt off this year. That's all I'm
Yeah,
telling
for
you.
sure.
No, you'll work your butt off, and I'm a bit of a I'm a bit of a slave driver, but that's the nature of my personality. But I think you respond well to that, though. I think you want to be pushed, and I think
Yeah, of course.
yeah, you're going to push yourself this year. But you know what? We're in the how long have I been doing? In the 10 years at Varsity College Pietermaritzburg, I've never had a student fail on me, and I would imagine there've been a couple of 150 students through me, if not more. So yeah, I don't get fails, but we're very scared because we've not ever done it in distance. But I don't get fails. Okay,
I'm going to
so
make you proud.
yeah, I know, boy, you're going to suffer if you don't. Let me tell you, I'm a bully.
Mhm.
I'm a
Mhm.
bully, but I think you're going to be fantastic. Now, yeah, no, your screen is not going to be big enough to see if I draw this, but when we look at your research approach,
Yeah.
your research paradigm is the lens. The research approach has to be in step with the research paradigm. So the research approach must be aligned to the research paradigm. For
Okay.
positivism, you will do quantitative research. So positivism, you'll do quantitative research.
Okay.
When you do interpretivism, you will do qualitative research. If you have a critical realist approach in terms of your paradigm, you will do mixed methods.
Okay.
Okay. And you can see why. Because we said with positivism, it's numbers and stats and reducing to numbers and stats. That's why it's quantitative. Qualitative, because we understand from the perspective of the individual who's lived those experiences. And mixed methods, as we said, it's a combination of positive and interpretivism, and that's why you would use both quantitative and qualitative bits of research.
Or qualitative, okay, we said we'll do it.
Okay,
Interpretivism.
interpretivism, qualitative, positivism, quantitative, mixed methods, critical realism.
Okay, but I'm not going to do that.
No,
Not
you're not going to,
interpretative.
I'm not going to allow people to do it, Boyo, so don't
Okay.
worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah. But for this exam, it's important because you need to know all three. This is the
Okay.
theory exam. This is not it's not
That's
your
true.
research. Okay, so you need to
So
know all
mixed
three.
method we said was
Quantitative for positivist, qualitative for interpretivist, mixed methods for critical realism.
okay.
Okay. You'll remember it after this. You'll remember it.
Yeah, I'm writing it all down. No, I can zoom in on my phone, so it's not bad.
Okay, boy, that's fine.
Okay.
Right, so let's look at the different research approaches. So the first one, linked to the positivist paradigm, quantitative methods. And you can see what we look at there, Boyo. It is about numbers and stats. We work with numbers and stats, and we look at the significance of relationships, and that comes back to causation or correlation. Okay, so how strong that particular relationship is. We can clearly see that the amount of alcohol you consume and your ability to drive is a causal relationship. But, a correlational relationship turned out to be your organizational citizenship behavior and your attitudes towards wastage in a restaurant. The way we do the actual research, so your research method, is always going to either be surveys or experiments. Now, experiments would be the alcohol driving on a skid pan type thing. Now, we're not going to allow experiments, obviously, at an honors level. So we'll do surveys. Generally, and you'll see how we do it, boy. We use existing scales that are
Experiments.
out there, and we just use those scales within the context of our research.
So
So this.
is interviewing a huge part of this?
No, if you're doing
Mhm.
positivism, you're not going to interview anyone.
Okay, that's better then.
Yeah. No, well, it depends on, yeah, that's it. Where if you're doing positivism, you're not going to interview. We normally use Google Forms or flipping hell, Survey Monkey, or well, I don't, we'll use Google Forms, or you'll use Microsoft. There's similar to Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, I think it is. And what we do is you then set up a number of Likert scale questions. You know what a Likert scale is? You know, always, almost always, not sure, never, almost never, never. You know, that kind of
Oh,
relationship,
yes.
Likert scale. Yeah, you've seen them before when you did
Yeah, yeah,
customer
yeah.
service
I just
ratings.
don't know the name for it. But
Yeah,
you
don't worry
so much
about
I
it.
think
It's a Likert scale.
like it.
Now, we will do surveys. So when you do your quantitative research, you will do survey research. Okay. Uh,
Okay.
we'll worry about all of that. In terms of, you see now, look at this. It's now only given me that. Why is that? Why is that? Okay. Yeah, I'm not happy with the textbook. In terms of interpretivism, not that it's bloody covered here now, I'm irritated about that. In terms of
Yeah.
interpretivism, Boyo, you will do interviews, whether it's one-on-one interviews or focus groups. Interviews or focus groups. I generally will not allow a focus group at an honors level. You have to know what you're doing when you do a focus group. So it'll be interviews. I think you're not so keen on that.
Yeah.
Not serious. You know, we'll do surveys for you. It's easy enough. We'll do
Yeah.
surveys. Okay. Then in terms of the research process, you write your research proposal. The research proposal is the one or the first major barrier that you have to get across. So in terms of the research proposal, it really is your plan in terms of you going forward with your process. You can only generally move forward in the research, start contacting your research participants, etc., once you've had your research proposal approved. We're pretty good at that. There are sometimes students and supervisors that don't listen, and they might get their research proposal turned down. But you'll see the approach when we do it in classes that I am very strict, that we sort things out before it gets to research proposal stage. And then, yeah, there are a couple of things that we'll worry about. I'm not going to go through that. So pilot testing, often with pilot testing, you will do it when you do particularly quantitative research as part of positivism. So you'll just get your questionnaire checked in terms of does it make sense or not. Or you could run a focus group just to see whether the interview questions you have make sense or not. Okay, so that's really just part of the research process. Then it's interpreting your data, analyzing, interpreting. Quantitative, you'll end up presenting information like that, a nice histogram there. All of that we'll take you through. We use Excel spreadsheets. I've got all the formula, so we're not worried about that. And then, yeah, analyze and interpret qualitative data. So what happens when you do qualitative research is you will transcribe each of your interviews, and then, yeah, we'll go through this, and then you start coding those to create themes in terms of the patterns that come from your research questions. Okay, well, and then it's the research report. And then obviously what we want to do. Okay, it says here, take a time to reflect. Well, can we take a quick 5-minute break? Do you mind?
No worries.
Okay, 5 minutes. I just am going to stop the recording. Okay. Okay, I'll see you in 5 minutes. Sorry, Boya.